I drove back to Charleston for one reason: to sit quietly in a ballroom full of cardiologists and smile for a photo I'd probably never be sent. That was the plan. Then I heard my mother-in-law's voice carry through the front hallway, soft and unhurried, the way it always was when she was certain no one would push back. She quit, Sandra said. Or failed. Hard to tell with her. The laugh that followed belonged to someone I didn't recognize. It didn't matter. I had heard enough variations of that sentence to know it by its shape now, the way you know a road by its potholes long after the headlights go out. I didn't correct her. I didn't call out from the foyer. I set my bag down by the staircase and waited for the sound to finish. Charleston looks like a postcard someone forgot to mail. Spanish moss, wrought iron, streets that curve like they were drawn by someone in a hurry. My husband grew up here. He had his mother's cheekbones and his father's instinct for silence at the wrong moment. And when I married him, I married all of it: the charm, the careful avoidance, the house on Rutledge Avenue that smelled like gardenias and something older underneath. I had taken the earliest flight out of Bethesda, not because I wanted the extra hours here, but because leaving early meant I could control where I landed before the chaos, before the centerpieces got arranged, before Sandra had time to brief the room. The drive from the airport was 22 minutes. I know because I timed it the first time I made it, 4 years ago, the weekend my husband brought me home and Sandra looked at my hands the way a jeweler looks at a stone she suspects is fake. She was standing at the bottom of the stairs when I came through the door, arms crossed, smile assembled and ready. "Well," she said, "you made it." I gave her a hug because I had learned that refusing them made things worse. She accepted it the way a person accepts a handshake from someone they plan to outlast. "We weren't sure you'd be able to get away," she continued. "Given everything. Everything." The word she used whenever she wanted to imply a disaster, she was too polite to name directly. "I'm here," I said. Her eyes moved down and back up, cataloging. The gray wool slacks, the navy blouse. Clean, understated. I had learned not to try too hard in this house. Trying too hard gave her something to comment on. So did not trying hard enough. "Your father-in-law will be happy," she said, which was her way of saying my husband's father would be happy, not that she was. "He's been asking about you." "I'll go find him." She touched my arm, light and deliberate. "He's on a call with the hospital board. Don't interrupt. Tonight is a big night for him." "I understand that." She tilted her head. "Do you?" "Because sometimes I think the timing is a little—" She paused, "searching a little inconvenient for you. All the travel you've been doing. I've been working." "Right." She smiled. "Of course." That was how it went with Sandra. Never a direct accusation, always a question wearing the clothes of a compliment. She had spent 3 years cultivating a version of me that was easier for her to manage: vague, underachieving, professionally suspended somewhere between ambition and failure. She had told her book club I left medicine for government admin. She had told the neighbors I was in between things. She had told my husband, more than once, that she worried about me. My husband worried with her because it was easier than asking me directly, and because I had stopped explaining years ago, not out of pride, but out of necessity. Some parts of my work existed inside clearances and protocols that made dinner table conversation impossible. When I said I can't talk about that, he heard I don't trust you. When I said I've been reassigned, Sandra translated it for the room and called it retreat. I found my father-in-law in his study. He was a tall man, slightly stooped now, in a way that had arrived gradually enough that I think he hadn't noticed yet. 40 years as a cardiologist in Charleston. 3 generations of families whose hearts he had kept running. Tonight the hospital was throwing him a retirement gala, the kind of event that filled a ballroom with people who owed him something quiet and enormous. He looked up when I appeared in the doorway, and his face did something it didn't do for many people. It relaxed. "There she is," he said. He was the one person in this house who had never asked me to make myself smaller. "You look tired," he said. "Long flight." He nodded, unconvinced. He had been a doctor too long to believe that tired was only ever about sleep. "Come sit." I sat across from him and we talked the way we always had, without performance. He asked about Bethesda. I told him what I could, which wasn't much, but he never pushed. He had a physician's instinct for the boundaries of a person's disclosure. He knew how to ask a question and receive a partial answer and treat it as complete. "You'll be there tonight?" he asked. "I'll be there. Sandra has the seating arranged." He hesitated. "You're at table 9. Table 9. 4 rows back, near the emergency exit." I recognized the architecture. That's fine. He looked at me steadily. It isn't, he said. But tonight I would like to simply be an old man receiving a plaque and not a referee. I smiled. You won't need to referee anything. He wasn't entirely convinced, but he let it go. There are things fathers know and choose not to name. He was that kind of man. Upstairs, I changed into the black dress I had packed. Simple, appropriate, nothing that asked for attention. In the mirror, my face looked the way it always did before events like this. Composed, slightly braced. Like a building that has learned to carry its own weight quietly. From down the hall, I could hear Sandra on the phone, her voice bright and managing. She was confirming seating arrangements. She was reminding someone about the centerpieces. She mentioned my name once, briefly. I couldn't hear the rest of the sentence, but I didn't need to. I had stopped needing to hear the full sentence a long time ago. My husband appeared in the doorway, loosening his tie and then retightening it. He had his father's eyes and his mother's habit of entering a room without fully committing to it. "Hey," he said. "Hey." He watched me in the mirror. "You look nice." "Thank you." He sat on the edge of the bed. "Mom said you seemed tired." "I'm fine." She worries." "I know she does." There was a pause between us, the shape of everything we hadn't said in 3 years filling the space. My husband was not a bad man. He was a man who had been taught that smoothing things over was the same as fixing them, and he had never been forced to learn the difference. "She told me you were late requesting the time off," he said. "I wasn't late. I had 2 weeks of leave approved." He nodded. "Right," she just said. I know what she said. He stopped straightening his tie, looked at me directly for the first time since I'd arrived. "I'm not trying to," he started. "I know you're not." I turned away from the mirror. "Let's just get through tonight." He nodded too quickly, the way people do when they're relieved not to have to finish a conversation. "Okay, yeah. Dad's really glad you came." "I know he is." We drove to the gala in the same car and said almost nothing. The kind of silence that has accumulated too many unspoken things to feel comfortable, but too much exhaustion to break open. Sandra sat in the front seat and talked for everyone, filling the car with logistics and names and reminders. My husband drove and nodded. I watched Charleston slide past the window, all those lit-up porches, all that careful beauty. The hotel ballroom was exactly what the occasion called for. High ceilings, round tables, the particular smell of a catered room, warm bread and fresh flowers, and something institutional underneath. A string quartet played near the entrance. Uniforms and evening wear moved together in the easy combination you see when medicine meets community in a city that has been layering its rituals for 300 years. My father-in-law was absorbed immediately by well-wishers, faces lighting up when they saw him, hands reaching. He was a man people genuinely loved, which is not always true of respected men. He accepted the attention with the graciousness of someone who had earned it without chasing it. Sandra worked the room with precision. She knew everyone's names, everyone's children, everyone's recent surgery. She was extraordinary at this, the management of social space, the choreography of proximity. She touched my husband's arm to steer him toward conversations she wanted him to have. She laughed at the right moments and said the right things, and occasionally glanced toward me the way a general glances toward a variable in the field. I drifted to the edges. It was not bitterness. It was habit, preference, and a kind of practiced invisibility I had cultivated across years of operating inside systems, where being underestimated was occasionally an asset. A few people recognized me from previous events. "Oh, you're Robert's daughter-in-law? How wonderful. What is it you do?" And then the careful ambiguity. "I work in federal medicine." A smile. A change of subject. Their expressions hovering between interest and uncertainty, which was where I preferred to leave them. Behind me, near the cocktail tables, I heard a woman say to another, "I thought she left the Air Force." "Something happened with her career," I heard. Sandra mentioned it. The second woman lowered her voice. "Such a shame. Robert was hoping she'd follow him into cardiology." The first woman shook her head. "I heard she's doing something administrative now. Makes you wonder." I picked up a glass of water and moved toward the window. My mother-in-law found me 15 minutes before the program began. She approached with the kind of smile that meant she had a task already decided. "There you are," she said. "I've been looking for you. Here I am." She glanced toward the entrance where the check-in table was stationed. Name cards, table assignments, the kind of organizational infrastructure that someone had to manage. Our volunteer coordinator had to step out. Family emergency, apparently. She gestured toward the table. Would you mind? Just until Patrice gets back. It would be such a help. I looked at the table. At the neat rows of name cards and the pens lined up with deliberate symmetry. At the early arrivals who were beginning to filter in. It's only for a few minutes, Sandra added. Unless you'd rather just she let the implication hang stand here. I looked at her. She looked back. Patient. Pleasant. Certain. Of course, I said. I'll handle it. Her satisfaction was immediate and total, the way it had been when she had found the thing she'd been looking for. You're wonderful, she said. She touched my hand briefly. I knew you'd understand. I moved to the check-in table and began working through the list. It was not complicated work. Names confirmed, table numbers given, programs handed over. Most people accepted without looking up. A few did a double take when they recognized me, Robert's daughter-in-law, wasn't it, but said nothing that required a response. I smiled. I directed. I watched the room. Sandra reappeared near the stage, standing beside my husband, her hand on his arm. She was talking to the hospital's chief of staff, voice animated, demeanor radiant. From that distance, it was a beautiful picture. A family assembled for celebration. 40 minutes into the event, the program had not yet begun. The room was still filling. I was still at the table. A shift moved through the entrance before I understood what was causing it. Conversations near the door dropped in volume first, then across the room in a widening wave. The string quartet continued for 2 measures and then slowed almost imperceptibly, the way music does when the musicians feel something change in the air. I looked up. The man who entered was in dress uniform. Air Force. The kind of uniform that a room full of physicians recognize not by specific insignia but by something more fundamental, the way it carried itself, the way the person inside it moved, as though he had been walking into rooms and altering their gravity for years and no longer thought about it. 3 stars. Lieutenant General. I recognized him before he had crossed the threshold fully. The Surgeon General of the United States Air Force did not attend retirement galas in Charleston on a Tuesday evening by coincidence. Sandra's eyes sharpened from across the room. I could see the recalibration happening in real time. Who was this? What did he represent? How quickly could she introduce herself? The Lieutenant General exchanged a brief nod with the doorman and then did what I had hoped he would not do. What part of me had known he inevitably would. His eyes moved through the room with the systematic efficiency of a man trained to assess environments quickly. They passed over the stage, the tables, the assembled physicians and donors and spouses. They stopped. At the check-in table. At me. I set down the program I was holding. There was a fraction of a second where everything was still that moment, just before an irreversible thing begins to move. Lieutenant General Caldwell stepped out of the receiving line, walked past 3 people mid-conversation, and crossed the room toward the check-in table. Toward the woman everyone in this room believed had quietly failed out of military medicine and landed in federal administration. The tray, the table, the name cards, they all felt suddenly like objects in the wrong story. I came to attention without deciding to. Spine straight, shoulders square, the body remembering what the mind was still catching up to. Lieutenant General Caldwell stopped 2 feet away. He came to attention. The salute was sharp, formal, unmistakable. The sound the room made was not a gasp. It was a held breath, collective and stunned. I returned the salute precisely, because there was no other way to receive it. He lowered his hand and extended it. "Colonel," he said, voice warm and carrying. "I didn't expect to find you working the door." The title landed like something physical. Colonel, not ambiguous, not implied. Spoken into a room of 240 people, clearly, without ceremony, the way you say a thing you have always known to be true. "Sir." I shook his hand. "Small world." He smiled briefly. "I heard you were in town. Thought I'd pay my respects to Dr. Harlan and take the opportunity." His eyes were steady, direct. "How is the program running?" "Well, sir." "Good." He nodded once. "We missed you at the Bethesda conference last month. I was in Ramstein." "Right," he said. "Of course." He said it the way a person says "of course" when they mean "obviously," because Ramstein was a place that anyone familiar with my record would know I might reasonably be. Not vacation. Not administration. Surgery. Behind him, something fell. I didn't look to see what it was. A program, maybe. A glass set down too quickly. I was aware of my mother-in-law the way you are aware of a change in temperature. I did not look directly at her. I did not need to. I could feel the stillness where her social momentum had been. Lieutenant General Caldwell turned toward the room with the ease of a man entirely accustomed to being its center. He addressed the MC near the stage. "I apologize for the disruption. Please continue." Then he turned back to me. "Would you sit with us, Colonel?" His aide was already moving a chair toward the table nearest the stage. "Yes, sir, thank you." I stepped away from the check-in table. No one had resumed their conversations yet. My husband was standing 4 rows back, pale in the way that people go pale when reality has rearranged itself faster than their understanding can follow. His mother was beside him, and her face was something I had never seen on it before. Not anger, not calculation, not the particular warmth she deployed like a tool. Absence. Of expression. Of preparation. Of anything that had been there 40 minutes ago. My father-in-law stood near the stage entrance. His expression was different from everyone else's. Not shock, exactly. Something more complicated. A man understanding that his daughter-in-law had been carrying something heavy and unremarked in his own house for years, and that he had not seen it, and that this realization was going to cost him something in the quiet later. Lieutenant General Caldwell greeted my father-in-law with genuine warmth. "Robert," he said, 40 years is a remarkable record." My father-in-law shook his hand with the slightly dazed expression of a man whose retirement party had taken a structural turn. "I'm honored you came," my father-in-law managed. Caldwell nodded toward me. "Your daughter-in-law has done exceptional work for this country," he said, with a directness that was not unkind but was not decorative either. "You should be proud." My father-in-law's eyes moved to me. Something in them broke open slightly. "Yes," he said. "I am." The program began. It was not the program anyone had planned. The MC returned to the microphone with the careful energy of someone improvising inside a script that no longer applied. The room settled into seats with the distracted compliance of people still processing. Applause came a beat late. Conversations at the tables were hushed, urgent, heads leaning together. I sat at the table Caldwell had indicated and watched the room adjust. Sandra's adjustment was the most visible. She had seated herself beside my husband, and her hand on his arm was no longer a gesture of ownership. It was something else. Something smaller, steadying. She looked toward me twice. The first time her expression still held a remnant of the evening she had planned. The second time it did not. My husband did not look away from the stage, but he was not watching the stage. The tribute to my father-in-law was warm, genuine, full of the kind of accumulated affection that a career in service earns. He spoke briefly, with a gratitude that sounded real because it was. But his eyes found mine midway through and stayed there for a long moment. And I understood that what he was saying from the podium and what he was saying to me were two different things, and both of them were true. The applause when he finished was long, the kind that feels like it's making up for something unspoken. After the program ended, the room dissolved into the specific looseness of an event that had over-delivered on drama and was now negotiating its own aftermath. People moved in clusters. Voices rose. Glances moved between me, the lieutenant general, my father-in-law, my husband, Sandra. I did not go looking for any of them. I stayed at the table, talking with Caldwell's aide and a hospital department head who had questions about the Air Force's trauma surgery program. Ordinary conversation. Professional. The kind I preferred. Sandra found me first. She arrived at the table from the side, the way people approach a conversation they have not decided how to begin. She stood for a moment without speaking. I waited. "Well," she said finally. Her voice had lost its shape. The music was gone from it. She stopped. She tried again. "I didn't realize." "I know you didn't." She looked at me directly in a way I had rarely seen from her. Stripped of the usual armature. "I told people you left," she said. "I know. I told Thomas you left," she repeated, more quietly. My husband's name sounding strange in that particular sentence, in that particular voice. "I didn't correct you." Her jaw tightened. "No, you didn't." She wanted more from that sentence than I was prepared to give it. An accusation she could deflect, a confrontation she could navigate. Instead, I sat quietly and looked at her. "Why didn't you?" she asked. "Because correcting you required explaining things I wasn't able to explain." Her eyes moved away briefly. When they came back, they carried something I had never seen in them. Not remorse exactly. Something adjacent to it. The beginning of a calculation that was arriving at an uncomfortable number. "I was protecting Thomas," she said. "From what?" She paused. from feeling like he'd married someone who her voice dropped, who outranked the family. The sentence hung there between us, naked and strange. "That's not protection," I said. She didn't respond. She looked at her hands briefly. When she looked back up, the expression had not entirely resolved itself into anything clean. "I'll fix it," she said. "The people I told..." "Sandra." She went still. "It's not the people you told," I said quietly. "It's 3 years." The silence that followed was different from the others. She understood what I meant. And she understood, I think, that I was not asking her to produce an apology. I was asking her to understand the dimension of what had been lost. Those are different requests, and one of them is considerably harder to fulfill. She stepped back slightly, nodded once, barely perceptibly, and moved away into the room. My husband came to me 20 minutes later, after the crowd had thinned, after Lieutenant General Caldwell had made his rounds and departed with the same authority with which he had arrived. The room had recovered its surface calm. The caterers were moving between tables. The string quartet had given up on the program and was playing something quiet and undemanding. He sat down across from me without preamble, which was unusual enough that I paid attention. He looked like a man who had been walking towards something for a long time and had finally arrived at it. "Colonel," he said. It was meant as a joke, tentative, and self-aware. I didn't quite smile. "How long?" he asked. "I made full colonel 14 months ago." His eyes closed briefly. He opened them. "You never said. You never asked." The sentence was not cruel, but it was not gentle either. He accepted it. "I asked," he said carefully, "whether you were okay. I asked whether work was going well. You asked what your mother thought you should ask." He flinched. That one reached something. Good. Because it was true. We sat without speaking for a moment. At the far side of the room, Sandra was talking to a group of hospital administrators. Her voice returned to its usual register, but something in her posture was different, less centrifugal, like a room after the pressure has changed. My father-in-law was at the bar with an old colleague, laughing at something, and the laugh sounded genuine even if I knew it was carrying extra weight tonight. "I should have asked better questions," my husband said. "Yes." He looked at the table. "She told me you were drifting. After the reassignment, she said you seemed lost. I was in Kandahar for 6 weeks." He looked up, slowly. "I couldn't tell you where," I said. "I couldn't tell you for how long. I could tell you I was working, and I did. What she did with that, I stopped. What you let her do with that." He didn't argue. He had run out of the materials needed to construct a defense and seemed to understand it. "I believed her over you," he said. The sentence was quiet, deliberate. The kind of sentence a person says when they have decided to stop finding softer language for a hard thing. "Yes. I'm sorry." He said it without the reflexive qualifications that usually accompanied his apologies. No trailing excuses, no immediately redirected subject. Just the 2 words, sitting there, unadorned. I looked at him for a long time. "I know you are," I said. Outside the hotel, the Charleston night was cool and salted. The kind of air that clears your head whether you want it to or not. I stood on the terrace with a glass of water I had forgotten to drink, listening to the harbor. My father-in-law found me there. He didn't say anything at first. He stood beside me the way he had stood beside me in his study 8 hours ago, with the quiet patience of a man who had learned long ago that the most important conversations required a runway. "I owe you an apology," he said. "You don't." "I do." He turned toward me slightly. "I saw things in my house for 3 years and I chose not to ask." He paused. Because asking would have required me to confront Sandra, and I told myself I was keeping the peace. He was quiet for a moment. I was being a coward. That was a remarkable thing for a man of his generation to say about himself. "You were being a husband," I said. "I was being a coward," he repeated, gently firm. "I've been a physician for 40 years. I know the difference between peace and avoidance." I didn't argue. He was right. "What you have achieved," he said carefully. "What you have been doing." He stopped, gathered himself. "I am deeply, deeply proud of you." The sentence sounded like it came from somewhere below his prepared remarks, from somewhere he did not usually speak from. "Thank you." He nodded. He looked out at the harbor. Then he said quietly, "Caldwell told me outside. Before he left, he told me what you did in Ramstein." I waited. My father-in-law's jaw worked for a moment. 6 surgeries in 18 hours, he said. 4 of which were he stopped. He's not supposed to tell me, I know, but he wanted me to know. I didn't say anything. He put his hand briefly on my arm. Then he stepped back inside, because he was a man who understood that certain moments needed to be left alone to settle. I stood on the terrace a little longer. The harbor lights were steady out on the water. Somewhere behind me, inside the warm noise of the ballroom, my husband was finding his way toward a version of himself that did not defer to his mother's narration. My mother-in-law was finding her way toward something she would have to sit with privately. These things were not complete and they would not be tonight. But something had shifted in the architecture of things. Not destroyed, not dramatically rebuilt. Shifted. The way a foundation shifts when the pressure that has been bearing down on one side gets redistributed. I had not come here for this. I had come to sit quietly in the back of a ballroom and applaud a man who deserved applauding. That had been the plan. But truth has a way of finding the right room eventually. Not loudly, not always violently. Sometimes it just walks through a door in dress blues and stops in front of the person everyone had decided not to see. My husband came out to the terrace 20 minutes later. He stood beside me without speaking. He had left his jacket inside, and the night air had tightened his expression slightly, made him look younger. More like the man I had agreed to build a life with before the slow accumulation of small compromises had changed the texture of things between us. "Come home," he said. I looked at him. "Tonight," he said. "Stay. He stopped. "I need to do this differently." He turned toward me. "I've been letting her tell me who you are for 3 years, and I am asking you to let me try to undo that." It was the most direct sentence he had spoken to me in longer than I could easily calculate. "That's not a one-night project," I said. "I know. It's not a weekend conversation." "I know." He held my gaze. "I know," he repeated. "But it starts with tonight." I thought about the terrace at 3 a.m. in Ramstein. The cold there was a different cold. It was specific. It was earned. I had sat in a similar darkness on the other side of the world and thought about the particular loneliness of being known by the people you work with and unknown by the people you love, and I had not let myself feel it all the way because feeling it all the way would have made it harder to go back inside and do the work. But I was here now. And here was different. I handed him my undrunk glass of water. "You're buying me dinner tomorrow," I said. "Somewhere without your mother." He almost smiled. "Yeah, anywhere you want." I turned back toward the doors. Inside, the reception was winding down. The string quartet was packing up their instruments. The caterers were stacking plates. My father-in-law was somewhere in that warm light. A man who had spent 40 years repairing the hearts of strangers, standing at the beginning of whatever came next. I went back inside. Not for triumph. Not for the quiet satisfaction of watching the evening's reckonings distribute themselves among the people who had needed them. Not even for the Lieutenant General's salute, which would become a story other people told while I preferred to let it be a fact. I went back inside because that was where my life was, imperfect and interrupted and still, in some essential way, mine. Because the work of being known by the people who matter to you is longer and harder than any rotation I had ever served, and I had not come this far by walking away when the work got difficult. Silence is not weakness. I had always known that, but it is also not a permanent solution. Some truths need a room. Some rooms need a moment, and some moments arrive without asking whether you are ready. If any of this resonates with you, the years of being misread, the patience that gets mistaken for failure, the quiet that other people fill with their own stories, I want you to sit with this for a moment, because those stories they tell about you are not your record. Your record is what you actually did, on the days nobody was watching, in the rooms they never entered, during the hours they spent deciding you had given up. That record follows you everywhere. Even into rooms where no one expected to find you. Stay gentle. Stay steady. And thank you for being here.